No one expected Diddy, once the unshakable mogul of hip-hop, to completely unravel in the middle of a packed courtroom. But when the judge gave a subtle signal and an audio file began to play, everything changed. Cameras were rolling, reporters held their breath, and the voice on that recording, it wasn't some anonymous witness or rival from the industry, it was his own son, Christian Combs. What followed was a dramatic public breakdown, a betrayal that cut deeper than any legal blow, and a moment so raw it's already being called one of the most shocking celebrity courtroom meltdowns in years.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
The courtroom was tense, packed shoulder to shoulder with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers who had come to witness what was being called the biggest celebrity trial of the year. Every eye was on Diddy, cool, composed, stone-faced as ever. Then, without warning, the judge made a quiet signal. A new piece of evidence was about to be introduced. The room shifted, phones were silenced, pens froze mid-air. And when the judge revealed who was on the recording, the entire courtroom went still. It wasn't an accuser, it wasn't a bitter ex, it was Christian Combs, Diddy's own son. A gasp rippled through the crowd as the audio began to play. Diddy didn't move, not at first, but behind his stillness, something was brewing. The sound of Christian's voice, calm, clear, and damning, pierced the silence, and what he said would change everything. Private conversations, late-night flights, paid-off guests, secrets never meant to leave the walls of Diddy's mansions, all spilled from the voice of his own blood. And with every word, Diddy's mask started to crack. We know what's next. Here is
and when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
The audio wasn't grainy or vague, it was crystal clear. Christian Combs spoke like someone who had lived it, not just heard about it. He described scenes most people only imagined when they thought of Diddy's lavish, behind-closed-doors lifestyle. Private jets packed with unnamed guests, exclusive house parties where phones were banned, and massive sums of cash exchanged for silence. But this wasn't tabloid rumor or second-hand gossip. This was a son recounting things only someone inside the circle could know. And then came the part that no one could unhear. Christian's words didn't just paint a picture of wild celebrity excess, they hinted at orchestration, that someone was pulling the strings, that someone was Diddy. The way Christian spoke, measured, almost resigned, made it sound like he had been carrying this truth for too long. It wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was revelation, and that's what made it hit even harder. In the courtroom, you could feel the oxygen get sucked out of the air. Reporters scrambled to type what they were hearing, heads turned toward Diddy, and still he didn't move. But his face said everything. His composure was unraveling, second by second. Because this wasn't just testimony, it was betrayal. A betrayal broadcast on loudspeakers for the world to hear.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agreed.
At first, Diddy tried to keep it together. He sat motionless, eyes fixed on the table, sipping water like it could drown out the sound of his son's voice echoing through the courtroom. But as the recording continued, his hands began to tremble. His jaw tightened, his composure, something he'd spent decades perfecting in boardrooms, interviews, and press junkets, was slipping. And then suddenly he exploded. He shot up from his seat and shouted, voice booming across the room, "This is a setup!" All eyes turned. He pointed furiously at the speakers, shaking with rage. "He's my son! This is lie!" Chaos broke out instantly. Reporters fumbled for their phones, cameras snapped into overdrive, and the judge slammed the gavel, demanding order. But Diddy wasn't done. He kept yelling, over the lawyers trying to pull him back, over the judge, over the gasps and whispers.
Hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
It wasn't just anger, it was heartbreak, betrayal, fear. The unthinkable had happened, not in some private moment, but in a public courtroom under blinding lights with the whole world watching. U.S. Marshals had to step in, physically escorting him out as he kept shouting about being framed and betrayed by his own flesh and blood. The man who once stood as an untouchable figure in music and business had just come undone, live and unfiltered. Outside, the headlines were already writing themselves, Diddy's breakdown. Christian turns on his father of the Quasins, the empire cracks. But for those who were in the room, it wasn't just a moment. It felt like the beginning of the end. The internet exploded within minutes. The Diddy breakdown ensued after Christian Speaks began trending across platforms with fans, critics, and fellow celebrities weighing in. But the reactions were split down the middle. Some called Christian brave, a young man finally stepping out of his father's shadow to speak the truth. Others saw him as a traitor, the ultimate betrayal from someone who had grown up privileged under Diddy's protection and wealth. Was this justice, or was it a cold, calculated move?
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish.
Rumors swirled fast. Some insiders claimed Christian had turned over the audio to save himself from potential charges, suggesting a deal might have been made. Others insisted he simply couldn't carry the weight of silence anymore. But one thing was clear, his words had impact, not just because of what he said, but because of who he was. This wasn't a disgruntled ex or a faceless whistleblower, this was Diddy's son, his legacy, and now possibly his undoing. What made it even more devastating was Christian's silence after the courtroom bombshell. No statements, no social media posts, just silence, while the world spun theories around him. That quiet only added fuel to the fire. Was more coming? Was he afraid? Or was this just the beginning of something even bigger? Whatever the reason, the betrayal or truth, depending on who you ask, had already caused irreversible damage. And the world was watching not just to see what Diddy would do next, but whether Christian would speak again, and what else he might be holding back. Diddy's legal team moved fast, scrambling to contain the damage. Statements were issued within hours, calling the outburst a deeply human reaction to an unexpected betrayal. One lawyer told reporters, "This isn't just about a trial, this is about a father being blindsided by his own son." But behind the polished PR efforts, it was clear, Diddy wasn't just fighting allegations anymore, he was battling collapse from the inside out. Legal experts quickly chimed in, warning that his emotional outburst in court could have serious consequences. Judges don't take kindly to defendants who lose control in the middle of proceeding. And when your entire defense hinges on credibility and composure, a public meltdown isn't just embarrassing, it's strategic self-sabotage. Outside the courtroom, the damage was just as brutal. Once seen as untouchable, Diddy was now trending for all the wrong reasons. Headlines spoke of empire decay, power slipping, control law. Industry insiders whispered that former allies were distancing themselves, brands were going quiet, and longtime partners were re-evaluating ties. In an industry where image is everything, Diddy's was cracking wide open.
Why is Diddy's daughters at his trafficking trial? So Diddy's trial started today, and if you want a full report on that, I talked all about what played out in day one on the Kempire YouTube channel. So today was a productive day when it comes to the Diddy trial. They selected 12 jurors, and they started with their opening statements, and they had even 2 witnesses take the stand. What stood out to me was the fact that all of Diddy's children, except his youngest, Love, attended, including his baby's mothers. Misa Hilton was there, and Love's mother was there as well. But when I saw this photo and I saw that his young daughters that are 18 and 19 years old attended today, a trafficking trial, and literally they ended up leaving early when one of the male workers that had relations with Cassie and Diddy started getting into the salacious details of their sex life. They ended up leaving. I just can imagine that they're going to sit here and listen to all of this testimony. Cassie is set to testify this week. They thought she might testify today because her husband was in the building today, but I guess there wasn't enough time. But I wouldn't be surprised if Cassie takes the stand tomorrow. I get it from a legal standpoint, Diddy's legal standpoint. He wants to paint the picture that he's a family man. This is why the jurors need to let him go. His kids need him. But did you think about the kids being traumatized by hearing about your sexcapades? And I am not even debating about you having whatever relations with consenting adults, whatever you want to call it. They are also talking about domestic violence in this case between him and Cassie. This is traumatizing. If you read Cassie's lawsuit, if you've done any research on what he's being accused of, you do not want your young daughters listening to all of this if you truly care about them.
And perhaps the most painful part, it wasn't a prosecutor or a journalist who shook it all loose, it was family. A son who grew up in his world now becoming the face of his unraveling. For years, Diddy had carefully curated his public persona, mogul, father, survivor. But now, under oath and under pressure, that persona was breaking apart piece by piece. What happened in court was shocking, but sources say it was only the beginning. Insiders are whispering that Christian's recording might not be the only bombshell waiting to drop. Rumors of more audio, more documents, and even more family members willing to speak out are swirling fast. If true, this could turn from a celebrity scandal into a full-blown family implosion on the public stage. Speculation is now focused on whether Christian will take the stand. His courtroom confession was enough to rattle Diddy to the core, but if he testifies live under oath with cameras rolling, it could be catastrophic. People close to the case claim there's a mountain of material that hasn't seen daylight yet. If Christian really knows the inner workings of his father's empire, this trial could expose the secrets that Diddy's managed to keep hidden for decades. And behind the scenes, legal teams are bracing for impact. If more recordings exist, prosecutors might be holding them strategically, waiting for just the right moment to strike. And if more insiders come forward, this case could spiral into something much bigger than anyone expects. A case not just about fame, fortune, or reputation, but about power, silence, and how far people will go to protect or destroy it. Fans, followers, and the media are all asking the same question. Who's next? Will someone else in Diddy's inner circle flip? And if Christian was willing to talk, who's to say others won't follow? What started as one man's trial is quickly becoming something else entirely. A battle for legacy, loyalty, and truth. When the courtroom doors slammed shut behind him, Diddy wasn't just walking out of a legal hearing, he was walking into the wreckage of everything he'd built. In that moment, as his son's voice played for all to hear, something fundamental shifted. He didn't just hear accusations, he heard the collapse of a legacy he spent decades crafting. The applause, the respect, the power, it all felt distant, like echoes from a life that no longer belonged to him. For years, Diddy was untouchable, the mogul who turned hardship into an empire, the man who stayed winning while others faded. But now the very foundation of his rise, his family, his privacy, his control is unraveling. Not through leaks or lawsuits, but through the words of someone who once called him dad. And that's what made this moment unforgettable, because no matter how much money you have, no matter how many hits you've made or how many deals you've signed, when your own son turns on you in public, there's no brand strong enough to survive that untouched. The trial isn't over, more evidence may come, more secrets may spill, but one thing is already certain. The world has seen a side of Diddy they'll never forget. The empire may not fall overnight, but the cracks are visible now, and no amount of spin can unring the sound of that audio or erase the image of a father losing it all, one word at a time.